Our topic for tonight is an important one to set the stage for what is going to turn into the American Revolution. And if you really trace it back and look at the period before the Revolution and why problems start to develop, you could say that it starts with the topic for tonight's notes, the British Navigation Acts. And the Navigation Acts, another way to think of those is basically the trading rules that the British put in place for the British Empire. So these are the rules that have to do with trading. So we're going to explore this topic in tonight's notes. An important thing to understand first is, why would you have colonies in the first place? Why did England even have colonies? Well, there's a couple key reasons. One is to get raw materials easily and cheaply. England's a small island nation. It doesn't have a lot of raw materials like wood, for example, or a lot of good farmland that's available. But the colonies do, right? You have this huge area of North America where there's tons of wood, there's tons of great farmland. And so you can use your colonies to get raw materials. The colonies were also really important for England so that they had someone they could sell their products to. So when England has things like tea and iron tools and finished products like furniture or textiles, they need to be able to sell that. And if you've got colonies, then you have plenty of places to sell your goods and plenty of people who want to buy your goods. So those are two really important reasons to have colonies. And what they both have to do with is really the big reason is make money, right? You're going to have colonies to make money. So starting in 1660, England passed a series of laws dealing with trade to try to make sure that they achieved their goals so that they could make money off of the colonies. And these laws together are called the Navigation Acts. And they, to sum them up, it's actually a whole bunch of laws that we kind of group together. The basic points of them were this. The colonies were not allowed to sell certain products to foreign countries. So even if the foreign countries wanted to buy these things, you weren't allowed to sell it to them. And it wasn't everything, it was just the rare products that England really wanted. They were worth a lot of money. So that included fur, sugar, tobacco, rice, indigo, molasses. These are raw goods that you could make or you could get in the colonies, and England didn't want the colonies selling them to anybody else. You could only sell them to England. Another rule was the colonies could only buy certain things from England. You couldn't buy them from another country. So that included things like textiles or like cloth products, ironware, and spices. So again, if you're in the colonies and you want some spices, you can't buy those from other countries. You can only buy them from England. And another rule was you weren't allowed to use foreign ships for trade. Right? You were supposed to only use British ships. We're talking about foreign, mostly that meant countries that were rivals of England, like France, Spain, and Holland. These were the other big countries with colonies, and England was competing with them. So England wanted to make sure that these other countries weren't benefiting from the British colonies. So who benefited from these navigation acts? Who benefited from these rules? Well, certainly British merchants did, because you'd have to buy and sell through them. Manufacturers, right? Folks who were making the goods that you could sell in the colonies. And ship owners from England. So really, these rules are put in place to benefit England, to benefit Britain, and people who live and work in England. It also benefit colonial ship owners, right? Because you were only supposed to use British ships, and that included ships from the colonies. So if you had ships in the colonies, you could benefit from this too, because people would have to use your boats. But for a lot of folks, these rules really didn't benefit them, right? They weren't able to trade with anyone they wanted to. They weren't able to sell their goods to anyone they wanted to. There were limits. Before these laws were passed, Britain had practiced something called benign neglect, which is basically a fancy term that really means leaving the colonies alone to make their own decisions, or at least make most of their own decisions. So benign means harmless, and neglect means leaving something alone. So this was the idea that for the most part, the king and parliament left the colonies alone to make their own decisions. So why did England stop doing that with these navigation acts? Why did they start putting rules in place that weren't there before? Well, for one, starting in 1660, England became more stable. The government had just gone through about a 20-year civil war. So there were bigger problems in England that they needed to worry about. Right? They're not going to, when there's a civil war in England, they're not going to spend their time worrying about the colonies. They're going to let the colonies do what they want to do. Well, when the Civil War ends and the government in England becomes more stable, they start taking a closer look at the colonies. And what they see is that, hey, you know, these colonies have become much more valuable. And so they start putting some rules in place to benefit England. And as you could imagine, most people in the colonies preferred being left alone. They preferred the benign neglect. They didn't like the new rules being put in place. So they began to cheat, and they began to trade illegally, or what is called smuggling. So this set of notes gives you an understanding of what the navigation acts are, what those rules are, and why they were put into place. And it also gives you some insight into the fact that the colonists weren't really happy about it, right? And some of them were so unhappy that they broke the laws and they started to cheat. Finish your notes, answer the connection question on your notes, and make sure you print your notes and have them already printed and in your binder before the start of class.